Namaste, everyone. Good morning. Showing up to continue the readings of the Avadhut Gita, which to me bring such clarity and focus in my own journey, and allow me to see beneath the veils and also to work with the veils. I think it's really important to not create a gloss over everything, but rather go into the essence. Distilling process into the core essence. So to me, this is what this book does, and continue to share its power through its beautiful symbolic language. So we're almost done with chapter 1. We were in verse 75. In that state where one knows nothing at all, this versified knowledge does not even exist. So now, while in the state of samarasa, I, the Avadhut, have spoken the truth. We will read the reference on samarasa, so sameness, same taste. Samarasa, in that state where one knows nothing at all, refers to that awareness of the self in which all mental activity has ceased. Obviously, the author could not have written this song in that state of awareness, but now, as he says, he is in the state of samarasa, literally meaning same taste, a peripheral state of equilibrium in which he retains the awareness of the self while mentally perceptive of the world as his own manifestation. It is while in this state that he has written this song. It is meaningless to differentiate between the void and the world appearance. It's pointless to speak of the real and the unreal. Oneself, unchanging, exists alone. This is what all the scriptures declare. In this composition, called the Song of the Avadhut, this is the first chapter, entitled The Instruction on the Wisdom of the Self. So chapter 1 is this introduction to that radical sameness, radical unity, radical oneness of it all, where there is no distinction between form and the lack thereof, where every state is recognized as part of the same being. And I think there's a deep peace that comes into the heart when we are able to not only recognize in a mental way, but also allow the sense of belonging with reality to be so true that there's no separation. Because really it is in separation that pain is created, and that's part of our human condition, and that's part of what we're bound to live through and work through and learn from. And yet there is such a deep peace in the recognition of it all being from the same source, and that it doesn't matter how it looks, how it tastes, how it feels. Everything is here because of the self, and for the self, and to the self, back again. So, reading from chapter 2 now. You may be young unlearned, and addicted to pleasures. You may be a servant or a householder, it doesn't matter. Does a jewel require a guru in order to be valuable? Or is it worthless simply because it's covered with mud? You may lack learning or literary skill. You don't require such qualities as these. Hold fast to the truth and let go of all else. Even an unpainted boat will take you across. The self appears as both the animate and the inanimate world, yet it always remains in its own peaceful state. It is always pure consciousness, as calm as the sky. Though appearing as the animate and inanimate world, the self remains forever one. Where then is the division? There is no duality. It is clear to me. Indeed, I am the highest truth. I am Shiva. I contain the world both subtle and gross. I do not come, nor do I go. I have no movement. I have no form. It's really beautiful, the calling of Shiva and the recognition that we come from Shiva. My teacher Shunyamurti, he always made reference to Shiva not only as this powerful deity that creates, transforms, and sustains and destroys, but also Shiva, literally Shiv, the etymology of the word in Sanskrit means zero. And so it is that emptiness, that void from which all else emerges, and it's not separate. And that's all I want to say now. I'm unaffected by my component parts. Therefore, though the gods may worship me in my perfect wholeness, I recognize no distinction such as gods. Neither doubt nor ignorance can cause the slightest ripple in me. Let the modifications of the mind continue to occur. They're merely bubbles rising to the surface of a pond. So this, when we are starting to dive into the meditation journey, so if you're working with me or actually in any meditation center or meditation refuge, there's often a reference to the bubbling up, it's still being a part of, or when we're beginning to meditate, there's these waves of thoughts that come into our mind, and they can be quite powerful and quite overwhelming to begin to witness, like all of these movements and modifications in the mind. And yet the Chitta Vritti Nirodha in the Yoga Sutras, you can choose to go in one wave and give it its attention. The wave is going to reach the shore eventually, and you shall recognize that you were all along the entire ocean. Or also, you're a drop of water in this vast, immense sea of awareness, and all you have to do is dissolve into the sea of awareness. And what's interesting is the drop dissolves into the sea of awareness, and it recognizes itself as part of this one whole. But the ocean doesn't dissolve itself in one drop. So it's always moving from the finite self into the infinite self. And there's, of course, a Shaktipat, a reception of divine energy into our finite form. But really the merging happens from the personal will, or not. You could be also struck with a lightning bolt. But if we're talking about practice, about sadhana, is that letting go into the entire ocean. The ephemeral elements that form all things manifest in many different ways. Some things appear soft, others hard, some things appear sweet and others sour. The qualities of clearness, coldness, and softness are but qualities of water. Likewise, matter and spirit, prakriti and purusha, are but qualities of the one existence. Beyond all speech, beyond all names, beyond the subtlest of all the subtle things, beyond mind, intellect, and the five senses, the stainless Lord of the universe remains ever one. The stainless Lord of the universe remains ever one. If the universal self becomes known, how could I continue to be? Or how could you? Or the sentient and insentient world still be? The self is said to be like the sky. Indeed, it is like the sky. It's pure consciousness without any stain. It is truly the all-embracing whole. It remains unaffected, though it takes the form of earth, air, water, and fire. Though it takes all these forms, it always remains the same. All infinite space is pervaded by the self, but nothing else pervades the self. It is simultaneously within and without. It cannot be limited or divided in parts. It's extremely subtle and cannot be seen. It's primary to all qualities, the yogis say. It is that state that underlies all other temporary states of the mind. By practicing yoga unceasingly, without attachment to anything, little by little, a yogi is freed from all effects of the qualities, of the gunas. So verse 16 on chapter 2, by practicing yoga unceasingly, without attachment to anything, little by little, a yogi is freed from all effects of the qualities. So when we're talking about an Advaita Vedanta paradigm, the yoga that is referred to is from yug, which means to unite. And so what the book is making reference to, and if there's anybody that would disagree or would have another perspective, that's welcomed. From my understanding and the teachings that have been passed along to me, this yoga that he's speaking to is to unite with the self, yeah? So the yoga not as the movements, but yoga as that practice of union with that supreme reality. And this is the path to freedom, to recognize that union, to accept the love of God in the heart, to accept truth, to accept vitality in the sense of God power, the power of God, without any attachments to the forms that this will manifest. And I think this is absolutely beautiful. And he also speaks about freed from all effects of the qualities of the gunas. And so a guna is a quality, and there's a division of 3 gunas in the scriptures. So you have sattva guna, you have tamas, and you have rajas. And these are the qualities of the manifest world. So a tamasic guna is that guna which keeps you quite heavy. Literally in Ayurveda, there's a saying like, in tamas is when you don't do what you have to do, and rajas is when you do what you didn't have to do. So tamasic energy is quite dense. It's always sloppy, sluggish, lazy, dense, condensed, heavy. Whereas rajas is always moving, is quite fiery, And there's always something else to get to energetically, and it can never sit in stillness. And Sattva guna is that guna of complete centeredness and equanimity and focus. And it's interesting because even of that guna, we're to be freed, so that we can be in ultimate freedom of form. So it continues to speak about the freedom that one gains by practicing yoga unceasingly. Against the dreadful poison of worldly lust, which deludes men's minds, there is only one antidote: the nectarian awareness of the independent self. The subtle images are seen within, and the manifold forms are seen without. But the independent experiencer of both is known by all seers as the inner self. Experience without, it's the universe. Experience within, it's the power of life. A deep within that inner life, the real milk of the coconut resides. The outer knowledge is of the coconut's husk. The subtler knowledge is of the meat within. And concealed within that subtle core is that coconut milk of consciousness, the self. I think we'll stop the reading there. It's really interesting. I hosted a meditation this week in my house, and I had asked for coconut milk to make coconut matcha, and they couldn't bring it. And after the meditation, I opened the book on a random page, and it's exactly this verse that my eye goes to, and it's talking about coconut milk and the coconut milk of consciousness. And there's such richness and sweetness and nourishment in the coconut milk, and I think it's a beautiful metaphor when we're describing what drinking from the nectar of consciousness is. And I love that nectarian awareness metaphor. And so to use the metaphor of the coconut, and I think in Costa Rica this is a really beautiful metaphor to have in mind, because coconuts are present everywhere. So the outer knowledge is the coconut's husked, hardened, hairy. The subtler knowledge is of the meat within, and concealed within that subtle core is that coconut milk of consciousness, the self. I think when we begin to go into that inner self and realize the opening that this creates in our lives, there is a true experience of sweetness, of an internal sweetness, of an internal connection with something so precious and so beautiful and so delicate, yet so strong and so pervasive and so powerful. And this is how I experience the inner world when we're talking about these subtler aspects of our being. So this was the Avadhut Gita for this time. We read chapter 1, finished chapter 1, and started chapter 2, ending in verse 20. See you soon. Namaste.